Hi. So I wanted to take some time today and talk about 3 of my favorite underrated Disney movies. And they are The Emperor's New Groove, Atlantis, The Lost Empire, and Treasure Planet. I'm going to be splitting this video up into 4 parts, talking about each of these movies individually, and then the last one talking about some overall concepts about 2D animation, what happened to it, where it's going, and how these 3 movies tie into that subject. So I hope you stick around for all 4 parts, and just to forewarn you, there will be spoilers ahead. First up, Emperor's New Groove. Now, some people might not think of this as being an underrated Disney movie because this is probably the most well-known of the 3 I'm going to talk about, but here's why I consider it to be underrated. It is popular and well-known among fans, but as far as Disney goes in their promotions and their merchandise and their stuff, they never really show it and they never really talk about it. It's not one that they ever bring up, and it's not represented at all in any of Disney's parks. There's so much potential for this to be in parks, and so it baffles me that it's not. There's one ride in Japan, I think it is, that's Mayan themed, but there's absolutely no representation of the Emperor's New Groove, so it doesn't count. They could have done a roller coaster based off of the roller coaster that they take to go down to Yzma's lab. That would have been awesome. Starting off maybe with like a lever and all that jazz, that would have been hilarious. They could have done a theme ride that kind of just takes you through the journey of the movie, going all across the land and through the plot in the movie. That would have been so much fun. Or at one of their resorts or hotels or whatever, they could have had a Cusco-topia themed swimming pool. Or something on one of their cruise ships. Something that was Cusco-topia themed. That would have been awesome. But the biggest missed opportunity, in my opinion, is not having a Kronk cafe of some kind. That would have done so well. Oh, I'm so upset that there isn't a Kronk cafe somewhere in Disney's parks. So anyway, I really feel like Disney does not focus enough on this movie, and that's why I consider it to be underrated. So what this movie is probably the most well known for and recognized by is its humor. This is one of the funniest Disney movies there is. I have not met one person who has watched it and hasn't thought it's funny. The humor is just nonsense humor, but they play it off so skillfully where they don't ever draw the jokes out too long. They bring up a punchline, they deliver it, and then they move on.
Get them!
Hey, I've been turned into a cow. Can I go home?
You're excused. Anyone else?
No, we're good. We're good.
Get them!
Something I always appreciate in movies is consistency. And that's one reason I think this movie works so well, is when it comes to the pacing, the story, the humor, through the whole movie, it's consistent. It would have been really jarring if it was kind of fast-paced at the beginning and then slow-paced at the end, or the jokes really played up in the middle but not during the climax. You know, I always really appreciate it when movies have consistency, and Emperor's New Groove excels at that. And because they're using this kind of quick pacing, sometimes things can happen that might seem a little convenient.
How did you get back here before us?
How did we, Kronk?
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
Oh well, back to business.
But because it's consistent and it goes with the humor that they've already established, I feel like it is fine, and you accept it and it's a joke, you love it, and move on. Now, when you go behind the scenes and look at the making of this movie, it's really interesting because it's pretty dramatic.
For me, so much of the movie isn't working. I just don't know who I'm supposed to care about, what I'm watching. The pace seems really, really wacky.
And we have not found a movie yet. And I think, story-wise, for me, we're between 2 stools. We're neither a comedy, we're not a drama, we're not a this, we're not a that.
The movie that they set out to make in the very beginning is absolutely nothing like the movie that we got in the end. So the original story was actually going to be based on the story of The Prince and the Pauper, which is where there is a royal character and a common character who look alike and swap places. That's actually where it started. They had actually already cast David Spade and Owen Wilson to be the 2 characters that swapped places, and had actually done a whole bunch of voice acting for it and everything. They really were on their way down that road. But through a whole series of events and switching up of directors and huge story overhauls, they ended up coming up with a buddy movie. And so it is very impressive to me that with it going through so many creative hands over so many years, that they did come up with a story that was pretty consistent, as I said, because it was going to be a drama, it was going to be a musical, it was going through all these phases, but they ended up with something that was solid and didn't feel like it was a mesh of a whole bunch of different things. I really admire that. And I think it's fun how they very intentionally didn't stick with staying, historically accurate to the Mayan culture. I love how it's just all over the place and they're constantly referencing things from the 21st century. First off, it just gives them creative freedom to do whatever the heck they want, but it also is fun. Kind of reminds me of like Hercules or other movies like that are constantly referencing things outside of their time period. I think that that's really fun. The characters that they created are just some of my favorite characters of all time, and it has some of the best voice pairings to characters that I've ever seen. David Spade nails Cusco. He brings so much spunk and life to him that makes him so enjoyable to watch.
My face, good. My beautiful, beautiful face.
Okay,
I'm an
okay.
stinky
Well,
llama.
wait.
Llama face.
What happened?
Oh. I'm trying to figure that out, okay?
John Goodman is just always gold whenever you give him a voice to do. And it's really interesting because his voice doesn't really change too much between the characters that he voice acts for, but I never really confuse them. Like when I'm watching Monsters Inc., I hear him as Sully. When I'm watching him in We're Back, I'm hearing him as Rex. When I'm watching Emperor's New Groove, I'm hearing him as Pacha. And Pacha's wife, Chicha, is one of my personal heroes. I love her.
That kind of behavior, I gotta go wash something. What do you mean the door is stuck? Try jiggling the handle.
There is no handle in here.
There's not? Are you sure?
Patrick Warburton as Kronk. How could you not love him? How could this go wrong? He's perfect.
Oh, right. The poison for Cusco. The poison chosen specially to kill Cusco. Cusco's poison. Fat poison?
Yes, that poison.
Got you covered.
He perfectly portrays somewhere between, the idiot character and just the lovable sweetheart. And he has some of my favorite jokes in the whole movie.
Reason number 2. Look what I can do.
What does that have to do with me?
No. He's got a point.
And then who I really think the star of the show is Yzma. Her voice is just all over the place. It's so dynamic and it lends itself so well for a voice character who has to be more over the top than, a physical actor in a normal live action movie.
Ah, how shall I do it? Oh, I know. I'll turn him into a flea. A harmless little flea. And then I'll put that flea in a box. And then I'll put that box inside of another box. And then I'll nail that box to myself. And when it arrives, I'll smash it with a hammer.
And she has one of the best villain laughs of all time. It's one of my favorites. But here's something interesting to consider. Yzma isn't necessarily the only villain. And I'm not talking about Kronk. There's another force at play that is hindering Cusco, which is Emperor Cusco. He is his own worst villain in this movie because after being transformed into a llama by the bad guy, he is off on his own for quite some time before he bumps into her again. And during that time, the person holding him up is himself, just being completely self-centered, completely selfish, and mean to the people who are trying to help him, and just oblivious to their needs and hardships. And when does he overcome this villain? When does he beat them? It's during the scene of the voiceover after he overhears Yzma and Kronk's plan and loses Pacha.
See, just like I said, I'm the victim here. I didn't do anything, and they ruined my life and took everything I had.
Hey, give it a rest up there, will you?
What? I'm just telling them what happened. Who are you kidding, pal? They saw the whole thing. They know what happened. Well, yeah, but just leave me alone.
It's played off as a kind of a comic moment, even though it is probably one of the saddest parts of the movie. But to me, it's very important because it is him finally saying goodbye and getting rid of that negative force in life that has been holding him back. Because after that scene, there is no more voiceover from Kuzco, it is only the character you see on screen who is the new Kuzco, who has learned his lesson and wants to help himself and others. So there you have it. There are my thoughts on The Emperor's New Groove. It's towards the top of my list of favorite underrated Disney movies, and I know it's towards the top of a lot of yours as well. So thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you over in part 2 of my video series where I will be talking about Atlantis, the Lost Empire. I will include a link to it somewhere here on the screen and also in the description down below. See you there.